You look at the Twilight Zone, it's all talking about communism, psychology, space travel, all these things which were contemporary concerns at the time.
There are two popular approaches to discussing everyone's favorite streamed depressant, Black Mirror. The first, comparing it to the Twilight Zone, which makes sense.
There's like an episode of the Twilight Zone where Burgess Meredith is the last guy left on Earth after a nuclear war. And then he sees a library and he realises that, oh, well, at least I can read uninterrupted for the first time in my life. I can just read all these books, all these great works of fiction I've never had time to read. And he's got something to live for at last. He reaches over to grab the first one, his glasses fall off.
It's not fair.
And he's left literally on his knees weeping at the end of the episode.
It's not fair.
And I thought, that's the sort of thing that should be happening more often on television.
And the second approach is to put it in the context of Charlie Brooker's other work, Screen Wipe in particular. Brooker's never been shy about his opinions, so it makes sense to look at Black Mirror as yet another show where Charlie Brooker yells at a screen.
As a result, current ads scarcely mention the product. They're not even ads at all, but branded entertainment, which attempts to convey a vague sense of somethingness, but largely seems to exist in order to give toe-brained cretins something to repeatedly call genius within earshot, while you sit staring at a monitor in your cell of an office, fighting off overwhelming waves of sorrow and rage without ever letting them register on your face, not even for a second.
But for me, both approaches lack something. Rod Serling set the tone, sure, but he was a compassionate pop surrealist, far from the nerdy, technophile cynicism of Brooker. And Brooker's non-Black Mirror career has gotten its mileage out of mocking the content of television, games, films. Brooker cares about the message. Black Mirror seems to be about the medium. Neither approach addresses what's clearly the main theme of the show: modern society's relationship with technology. So, let's have a go at it. Where does Charlie Brooker lie in the history of science fiction? How does he hold up to the old masters? Is there anything that Black Mirror does that's new or innovative? Or is it just older sci-fi with a new case on it? In fact, I'd argue some episodes are just that. Take the season 1 episode 15 Million Merits. An everyman, reduced to a function, living in a society controlled by screens, who attempts to use love as an escape, and ends up damning his lover and himself into servitude for the greater order? We've heard this story before. Brooker just replaced Big Brother with, well, not Big Brother, but a reality show, nonetheless. But let's go back further than George Orwell, way back to the beginning of the science fiction genre. Fittingly, sci-fi began with a sort of creation story. Life and death appeared to me ideal bounds, which I should first break through and pour a torrent of light into our dark world. A new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. Frankenstein, of course. Though it's a passage from before Victor Frankenstein faces his creation, before he shuns his monster for shallow reasons. A new discovery, the failure of empathy, and a new form of cruelty. Mary Shelley's novel established so many of the themes of science fiction, not least of which is the hubris of scientific discovery, the folly of men who would overturn death, and the hypocrisy of those same people who would shun the results because of some narrow idea of what a human being should be. That any deviation from an ideal might make a person somehow incomplete. The Season 2 episode Be Right Back is a story where science overturns death, but the living can't give their creations the love they need. A kind of Frankenstein story, right? Shelley's novel is a deeply humanist one, and it began science fiction's long quest to understand intelligences other than our own, which of course helps us understand humanity at large. Frankenstein's monster serves as a flexible metaphor for any marginalized group, anyone pushed aside by society because of their appearance, their upbringing, their place in society. From its birth, the science fiction genre has explored the ways that people harm other people, and the tools we use to do it. One such tool? Economics. Over the 19th century, industrialization transformed the lives of the working class, reducing them to doing monotonous tasks, taking no skill, never understanding the importance of their labor. Karl Marx considered this alienation from the results of one's labor one of the key aspects of capitalism. Science fiction would express this alienation by reimagining Frankenstein's monster not as flesh, but as metal. But it wasn't until 1920 that we would have the perfect word for this dehumanizing state. And it came in a play written in Czech. Here, a man and a woman speak from inside a factory. What sort of worker do you think is best, from a practical point of view? Perhaps the one who is most honest and hardworking? No, the one that's the cheapest. The one whose requirements are the smallest. Young Rossum invented a worker with the minimum amount of requirements. He had to simplify him. He rejected everything that did not contribute directly to the progress of work, everything that makes man more expensive. In fact, he rejected man and made the robot. The playwright, Karl Čapek, gave the world the word robot, roughly translated from Czech, forced labor, from a root word in Old Slavonic meaning slave. Rossum's Universal Robots is a simple story, but a shockingly influential one. The Rossum Company ships robots out to the world as a cheap source of labor. And because Čapek was an anarchist, the robots revolt and destroy humanity. The first of 1,000 stories about the machines taking over. Čapek's metaphor took on a life of its own, and the robot became a sci-fi staple, a flexible metaphor for labor. Even more flexible as computing became more advanced, and we allowed machines to take the burden of intellectual as well as physical labor. As machines got smarter, sci-fi got more philosophical. If we surrender intellectual labor to machines, does that make the machines wiser than us? And if so, do they deserve to shape the course of human evolution? In 1950, 30 years after Čapek, another writer imagined another man and another woman pondering the implications of the thinking machine. But you're telling me that mankind has lost its own say in its future? It never had any, really. It was always at the mercy of economic and sociological forces it did not understand, at the whims of climate and the fortunes of war. Now, the machines understand them, and no one can stop them. How horrible. Perhaps how wonderful. Think, for all that time, all conflicts are finally evitable. Only the machines, from now on, are inevitable. Isaac Asimov's ambiguous ending to his anthology, I, Robot, opened up a new approach to the idea of the rise of the machines. That they know us better than we know ourselves. Not the robot uprising of Čapek, but a form of control more subtle. By surrendering control to a set of powerful algorithms, we allow those algorithms to define our existence. Even in the days of punch cards, sci-fi was wary of the programmable person. That anxiety never went away. The more we ask our machines to do for us, the greater power we give our machines to act against us. Enter that classic sci-fi cliche, the all-powerful AI. It had its heyday in the 60s. Arthur C. Clarke's HAL is a superstar, but less well-known was Holmes 4, the libertarian lunar supercomputer from Robert Heinlein's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, a story about a leaderless revolution using a computer as an organizing tool. A strategy used by certain other underground right-wing groups. For worse, or... hell, for worse. And in 1967 came Harlan Ellison's short story about AM, the mad supercomputer who keeps people imprisoned inside his circuitry, abusing them for his sadistic games. This story was, of course, I have no mouth and I must scream. The metaphor is simple. The computer represents power. The program, its method of control. A popular message for the anti-authoritarian era of the 60s. A time when control of the mind was a hot topic. Over the next decade, sci-fi freed its mind and started dreaming of electric sheep. Sci-fi of the time looked to the psychedelics of the Beat Generation for their language. So after a time, the prose of Asimov would eventually give way to writing like this. A gray disk, the color of Chiba sky. Now, disk beginning to rotate, faster, becoming a sphere of paler gray, expanding, and flowed. Flowered for him, fluid neon origami trick, the unfolding of his distanceless home, his country, transparent 3D chessboard extending to infinity, inner eye opening to the stepped scarlet pyramid of the Eastern Seaboard Fission Authority, burning beyond the green cubes of Mitsubishi Bank of America, and high and very far, far away, he saw the spiral arms of military systems forever beyond his reach. And somewhere, he was laughing, in a white-painted loft, distant fingers caressing the deck, tears of release streaking his face. It sounds like an orgasm, or the hit of a powerful drug, but it's neither. This is William Gibson's description of a man logging on to the internet. Neuromancer would be the Bible for cyberpunk, a new subgenre of science fiction which turned the tables on sci-fi storytelling. It was Gibson who gave us the outdated but still useful term, cyberspace. Cyberspace is simply a playground, a way of escaping a harsh reality. If used right, a heaven on Earth. Cyberspace, once explored, could be explained in less abstract metaphors. Desktop, file, window, copy, paste, delete. The arrival of the graphical user interface gave more people easier access to the shared hallucination of cyberspace, but made more mundane. Like any art form, cliches set in, and we got used to them. Later cyberpunk authors could see through that metaphor. Authors like Neal Stephenson, a man who came from a family of electrical engineers, and who, unlike Gibson, had a firm grasp on the technology he wrote about. More programmer than poet. In 1999, he released his book-length non-fiction essay, In the Beginning Was the Command Line, a collection of his thoughts about the modern personal computer and his feelings about using it. And in it, I found this delicious little phrase. Metaphor shear. That feeling all users experience when you realize the metaphor you're working in is bogus. When the computer fails you and you remember that there are 100 translations between input and output. Codes and translations that we don't have the time or patience to do ourselves. Intellectual labor that we've surrendered to a device. Karl Marx argued that industrial capitalism alienated people from the results of their labor. Stevenson observed that personal computers had the potential to alienate us from our own words, our questions, and their answers. Which brings me, finally, to another writer, a cynical British man, known mostly as a humorist, whose most famous work is a bleak science fiction series exploring the failures of modern computing technology.
The answer to the great question
Yes?
of life, the universe, and everything
Said Deep Thought. Yes?
is
Said Deep Thought, and paused. Yes?
is
Yes?
42.
Said Deep Thought, with infinite majesty and calm. The joke at the center of Douglas Adams' The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is about metaphor shear, the answer to an important question lost on its long journey from input to output. A computer glitch so huge, so strange, and so embarrassing that its programmers have to make a computer the size of a planet just to file a bug report. But unlike computers in Douglas Adams novels, the computers in Brooker's worlds work. They work really, really well. They do exactly what they are meant to do. But here's where I think Black Mirror is the most innovative. There is no AI, at least in the way we traditionally understand it. No artificial minds asking themselves just what they are or why they're here. No supercomputers attempting to solve the inevitable conflict. Very few robots. In fact, the most advanced software in the world of Black Mirror is people. So many of Brooker's stories use perfect copies of people, rendered as software. Easy to download, and very easy to abuse. Of course, this technology already exists. There are already other people on our devices, rendered as text and avatars. Individual contact abstracted through 100 layers of metaphor shear. And sometimes, that shear makes it too easy to commit inhuman acts. So many of Brooker's characters are forced to face the monstrosity of their own actions, done while looking through a filter. A theme Brooker has explored since the series' first episode. The entire population of Great Britain punished for entertaining an idea so ugly and ridiculous it can only be a joke, until it becomes real. The metaphor unsheared. The distance between actor and act finally closed. And we're back to the start. The original science fiction tragedy. A new discovery, the failure of empathy, and a brand new form of cruelty. Brooker's tech isn't broken. His people are. Black Mirror, like all great science fiction, isn't about how technology hurts people, but about how people hurt people. Computer technology has brought us together, and for too many of us, we don't know how to be together. Just by taking existing technologies and defamiliarizing them, Brooker reminds us that we're all still people behind the screens. That through generations of stories about seeking out new life, we still don't recognize it in each other. Every day online is a new discovery, a new failure of empathy, and a new form of cruelty. Brooker's stories aren't for anyone who hates new tech or uses it too much, but for anyone who still feels, who can still see the other users. In short, anyone who knows what love is. They'll understand.
Oh, they will understand if they try love.